50 years later. He was supervising the filming of a precision landing facility for F-86 fighter jets. Suddenly, a saucer-like craft flew directly over the cameraman. 3 landing gear apparatus opened, and the object landed on the dry lake bed.
They took all saucer shape, double-ended shape, metallic, and they went out, picked their cameras, and moved on out toward him, filming. And he lifted off, put the gear back in the well, and climbed out at a very high rate of speed and disappeared.
Cooper had the film footage of the strange craft developed. By the time it returned from processing, he had gone up through the ranks to report the incident.
Finally, with the colonel telling me to, when the film arrived at my desk, to put it in the carrier pouch. There would be a courier there at my office by that time already, and they'd arranged for him to fly in our base airplane back to Washington with these films.
Did you watch the film?
We didn't have a chance to run it. I had a chance to hold it up to the window and look at it. It was certainly a good film.
After the developed film was sent by plane to Washington, it was never seen or heard of again.
Did you ever keep in touch with anybody about it or discuss it?
How would I keep in touch with anybody about it? There's no way within the military or within the government of keeping track of something that is classified unless you're directly involved in it, and I was not.
Will you be ready?
I went into space to learn about the universe we live in, to get new insights, to go beyond the boundaries of our known existence.
Look okay?
Apollo 14 astronaut and 6th man on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, states in his book, The Way of the Explorer, that he's never had first-hand experience with UFOs. However, he has met with credible professionals within 2 governments who have testified to their own first-hand experiences with close encounters during their official duties.
The only people I know of that claim to have been in that position are former intelligence, military, and government people, and some contractor people, whose official duties in the early days were to investigate this and know about it. Those people were under, at that time, great restrictions and high security clearance that prevented them from telling the general public about it.
What we photographed up there affected me for the rest of my life.
In 1964, former U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Bob Jacobs was in the 1369th Photo Squadron at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. He was in charge of photo-optical instrumentation at a tracking site in Big Sur, 124 miles away. His mission was to film an Atlas rocket go through all 3 stages of powered flight. This particular mission was part of the Nike Zeus objective for the development of an anti-missile missile during the height of the Cold War. All cameras rolled as they heard liftoff from Vandenberg over their radio.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We were looking down southwest, and the missile popped up through the fog. It was just beautiful. And our guys on our M45 tracking mount with 180-inch lenses on it got it. And sure enough, we could see all 3 stages of powered flight as they burned out and dropped away. And then, of course, to our naked eye, all we saw was a constant trail going off into subspace. So we whooped and shouted and heard the film wrap off in the BU telescope and figured, well, that was our first big deal, and we got it.
Lieutenant Jacobs then took the cans of film down to Vandenberg to have them developed that night. The following morning, Jacobs was ordered to go immediately to the office of Major Florence J. Mansman, the ranking optical instrumentation officer in charge.
I walked into his office, and they had a screen and a 16-millimeter projector set up. There was a couch, and Major Mansman said, sit down, and there were 2 guys, as I recall, 2 guys in gray suits, civilian clothes, which was fairly unusual. And Major Mansman said, watch this, and turned on the film projector. And I watched the screen, and there was the launch from a day or 2 before at Big Sur. As the Atlas missile entered the frame, we could see the whole 3rd stage, which has two rocket nozzles like this and one in the center, a gimbaled one in the center, filling our frame from about 160 miles. That was pretty exciting optics. And then on that telescope, we could see the warhead, the dummy warhead.
According to Jacobs, at this stage the rocket was traveling between 11 and 14,000 miles per hour when a saucer-shaped craft entered the frame.
It flew into the frame like this, and it shot a beam of light at the warhead. Now, remember, all this stuff is flying at several thousand miles an hour. So this thing fires a beam of light at the warhead, hits it, fires another beam of light, and then flies out the way it came in. And the warhead tumbles out of space. Now, when the lights came on, Major Mansman turned around and looked at me and said, "Were you guys screwing around up there?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "What was that?" And I said, "It looks to me like we got a UFO."
Nearly 2 decades later, several letters written by Major Florence J. Mansman were obtained. In one dated March 8, 1983, Major Mansman corroborated Lieutenant Jacobs' story. In the film, the assumption was at that time extraterrestrial. Details would be sketchy and from memory. The shape was classic disc. The center seemed to be a raised bubble.
Now, Major Mansman said to me, after some discussion about it, he said, "You are never to speak of this again. As far as you're concerned, this never happened."
In another letter, Major Mansman describes how 2 agents took the footage. They did not sign out for all the footage, but took out that part that showed the encounter and returned the rest of the film as a complete package. The one agent stated as he handed me back the film, "That leaves you off the hook, but not off any disclosure. Understood?" Naturally, my answer was, "Yes, sir."
Major Mansman never saw it again, and as far as I'm concerned, or nobody else ever saw it again, certainly not at Vandenberg. I'm certain that it left Vandenberg and went somewhere else.
Another case involving nuclear missiles happened 3 years later at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. This site is the largest missile field in the world.
We simply were told not to talk about it. We did not talk about it to anyone.
As a Strategic Air Command launch controller, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Salas was one of the men responsible for the deployment of nuclear Minuteman missiles.
3, 2, 1, key turn.
These missiles were to be launched as a counterattack in the event of nuclear war. On March 16, 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Salas was on duty when he was contacted by his topside guard, stating that there was an unidentified object above the missile site.
Flight control, we advise initiating area.
Salas ordered the guard to observe and report back on any further development.
Then he called back within a few minutes and was very frightened. I could tell by his voice he was extremely agitated. He said there was an object hovering outside the front gate, a reddish-orange, oval-shaped object, and it just hung there quietly. I went and woke up my commander and told him about the 2 phone calls. And as I was telling him about the phone calls, our missiles